Welcome.
Welcome to.
I am tired
Oh,
tonight.
oh my gosh. The two of you with your early bedtimes.
I mean, listen, 4 o'clock is why. Is that too early?
Oh my gosh.
I'm usually in bed by
Well,
4
it's-
p.m.
It was early bedtime, and I guess last night was a late bedtime.
Right.
Yes.
Even though I knew it was going to happen the whole time. But
Well, we're recording the day after the 2024 presidential election. For those of you listening to this in who knows what year, because this is going to live on the internet forever. So somebody could be listening to this
Say 2024.
in 10 years. But we had a big election here in this country last night.
that's right. Baron Trump is now the 75th president of the United States.
Exactly. By the way, I don't want to talk about politics at all, but Baron Trump is so tall. He is like 8 feet tall. I don't know if you noticed, but
He's very tall.
he's so tall. And every
It's
time his
crazy.
father talks about him, he's like, yeah, he's very tall. He loves mentioning it. It's like something my father's never said about me, but you know,
It's
No,
it's like
No,
his
I've never
greatest
said about myself either.
his greatest accomplishment is having a gargantuan son.
I know. Exactly. But yeah, so the election happened and we're still here. Hopefully we'll, still be around and for many years and things will be fine.
We will be around.
Exactly.
I mean, I gave a class earlier today, and people were moaning, and like some people were like, "Oh, I have to sit shiva."
Really.
And I said, "Why? What happened? Like I played dumb. Like what? Well, why do you have to sit shiva? Did you know what happened last night?" I said, "No. What was there something in Israel that I didn't hear? No, the election." I said, "Look, we've been around for 250 years.
Yeah.
We were almost ripped apart by a thing called, may have heard of it, it's called a civil war,
Right.
or a number of states, tried to secede from this, and we survived that. We survived 2 world wars. We've survived natural disasters. We've survived the Vietnam War. We've survived a president leaving in disgrace. We've survived many other things. We will survive this as well.
That is
We are
true.
a strong people. The United States is an exceptional country. We are an exceptional people. We'll survive. We're coming up to the 250th anniversary of this country,
Right.
and we will still be here.
Right.
And I was talking to somebody today about it too, and the founders of America were very smart guys,
Right.
and
Yes.
and they more than anything else, they understood human nature, and they knew that when people obtain power, you want more power,
Right.
and they essentially built an entire system to prevent any one person from becoming too powerful. And so if you're that worried about it, I mean, the whole edifice of the American system is designed to prevent exactly what you're worried about from happening.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
it's.
But what about January 6th, Rabbi? What about January 6th?
Right.
I said, Mazel Tov, I have a friend that was born on January 6th. Is that what you're referring to? Well, that's what. No, he tried to overthrow the government. But look, the government succeeded. It succeeded.
Right.
He didn't overthrow the government. You see, look, Biden became the president.
I said,
and
I
he
told
stuck to it.
I told my students the following message, and it's just that, as Jews, we believe that Hashem runs the world and we have to do our part, obviously. And it's a good idea to vote if you're interested and know what's going on. And, if you want to play a part in it. But at the end of the day, we have to allow for our faith to play a role as well. And knowing that Hashem has a plan, and people find that message, I think, a little bit condescending when I say that, because it's like, oh, you're taking away our free will, or you're saying that, we don't matter and it's only God. But, I think that there's something very relieving about thinking about the world in that way. Like, I cannot, as one individual, control the entire destiny of this planet. I can only control my own destiny, right? And so barely, exactly. So believing that Hashem is out, somewhere there, like, and there's some kind of plan, and I don't understand the whole thing, and I can't see all the parts. It just makes me feel better. So I don't know. That's the message I was going with, and it actually prompted one of my friends to create a source sheet of all these sources from the Torah and the Talmud that relate to leadership of non-Jewish, like foreign leaders, and how the Jews react to it. So I'm sure let's link it, because it's actually really interesting to read through all of the sources and the commentaries, and why you're supposed to bless a foreign leader when you meet them, like a king, a non-Jewish king. Why, so all these different reasons. It's a great source sheet, and I would love to share it with everybody, because there's a lot to think about there. So anyway.
Alrighty.
I'm glad I prompted somebody to do Torah study.
Chest.
Yeah.
Let's get back to business.
Okay. This is not a political
edJEWcation.
Correct. There's a million political podcasts. This is not one of them.
Who knew that Donald Trump would prompt Torah study?
That's right. That's right.
I don't know.
That's
right. It's
amazing. Correct.
Amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of political podcasts, but none as important as this.
That's true.
No,
that's true.
No,
the insight you get here is you don't hear anywhere else.
Second to none.
That's right. So we are going to talk about a major figure in Jewish history, and not just for the Jewish people, but I think my father and I, and now Jay by extension, would agree that this is personally, this person is very important to us. And we touched on him a little bit in a previous episode that we did on the Hasidic movement. So today we're going to talk about the founder of the Hasidic movement, who we call the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. We talked about him sort of generally, a little bit about his life, a little bit about his philosophy in a previous episode. But today I think we're going to try to dive deeper into who he was and his lasting legacy, I think, on Judaism and the Jewish world. And I think it's fair to say that I wouldn't have this life if not for the Baal Shem Tov. I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be doing this podcast. My father wouldn't be who he is. So this is somebody that we are directly impacted by, as are Jews all over the world. So that's why we chose him, and he's a very, very important figure. So I don't know if Jay, you want to start with a question, and then we'll sort of move on from there. If you want to start.
Yeah, in reading about the Baal Shem Tov, it was interesting because he seems like almost a mythical kind of figure, where Maimonides, there was a lot, like his life was very well understood, and what he did, and his biography seems like it's pretty well documented and understood. It seems like the Baal Shem Tov's a little bit maybe not as clear exactly about about his background, but so I guess just to start off, Rabbi, do you just want to kind of give a quick biography of who the Baal Shem Tov was, and where he was born, and when he was born, and all that kind of good stuff?
Yep. The Baal Shem Tov was born in 1698. He was born in Eastern Europe, and his father and his mother had him later in life. Their parents were very, very poor. He was orphaned at a very young age, meaning I think by the time that he was 5 or he was 6, both of his parents had passed away. Mm. And the legend is that his father, Eliezer, called him in, and he named him at his bris Yisrael. And there's also later on interpreted that this was almost prophetic, because he was going to be destined to really impact the nation of Israel. And that's why he was called Israel, because at that time, and as we'll talk about a little bit later on, the Jewish people were kind of in a state of unconsciousness, and he came to revive them. And one of the ways that you revive someone is by calling their name and bringing them out of the stupor. So by giving him the name of Yisrael, even though that Eliezer may have had personal reasons to do that, later on it was interpreted that this was prophetic, that he was going to really have an impact on the entire Jewish people, who are called Israel.
Mention where he was born, like which part of Eastern Europe?
So he was born in Ukraine, and he lived most of his life in Mezhebush. There, so today there's a big shrine there in Mezhebush, and his father supposedly called him in while he was dying or prior to his death, and said to him, "Listen, I don't have much to give you in a physical sense, but I want you to remember these 2 things. Number 1 is love every Jew with all of your heart. Love of a Jew is most important. And number 2 is fear nothing but God. You have nothing to worry about in the world but God. and that was his Yerusha. That was his inheritance from his father.
That's nice, but I hope you give me more than that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
those are
Okay.
nice.
So now he's left alone. Now in this part of the world, there was no orphanages. I mean, you're
Right.
not, you don't become an orphan and all of a sudden pop into an orphanage and someone adopts you. So he basically grew up in the street, going from house to house and getting whatever he can get to eat and to live and to study. But a lot of the legend is that he spent a lot of time in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to be alone. He was alone and he was not afraid. So he spent a lot of time in the forest. And once, while he was in the forest, he noticed a young man standing by a tree and praying fervently. This grabbed his attention, and he was a kid. And he went over to this individual and he tried to get some information. What was he? Who was he? And the person refused. He didn't want to tell him anything about himself. But Baal Shem Tov was persistent. So finally he got out of him that he was a Kabbalist. Now, in those days, we had talked in a previous episode about Shabtai Tzvi, about the debacle of Shabtai Tzvi, and this entire episode of him proclaiming himself to be a Messiah, which turned out to be false. Well, the consequence was that the entire study of Kabbalah was buried underground, that the authorities decided this is not healthy for people to study Kabbalah, and they buried it.
And one thing real quickly, this would have been pretty soon after Shabtai Tzvi died, right? Like within a couple, like a decade.
Tzvi died, yes.
Like a decade or two?
A couple of more decades. Shabtai Tzvi, I believe, died in the 1670s.
Yeah,
and this was early in the 1700s. So it's in the same generation,
Right.
certainly the same generation. Now, what happened was, as much as they tried to bury it, there was always going to be a small cadre of people that were going to study Kabbalah hiddenly. And there were rumors that these people were what we called tzaddikim nestorim, hidden tzaddikim. We find in literature that in the world there are 36 hidden righteous people that you don't know about them, but they're put in the world. They know that they are righteous. They don't reveal themselves, but they are here literally to help and to guide the Jewish people in different ways. And there were rumors that there were 36 tzaddikim, and some of them were living in the Ukraine, and there were like small little packets of secret Kabbalists, and the leaders of these groups were called Baal Shem. There was Rabbanim Baal Shem, Rabbi Yoel Baal Shem. So he was not the first Baal Shem Tov, but there were others before him. And the person that he encountered that day was a follower of one of the Baal Shems. And he implored him to please take him under his wing and to teach him something. The man absolutely refused. They say, no, we can't. This is a hidden sect. Once they find out about us, they're going to expose us. And if they expose us, we'll be in terrible trouble. But he was very persistent, the Baal Shem Tov. And eventually he took him in and brought him into this organization. I wouldn't even say it's an organization. I would say it was a small cadre of people that outwardly were very simple people and went about their business on a daily basis, but hiddenly they studied Kabbalah and they lived their lives according to Kabbalah, and they were serious. They were Orthodox people. They were very religious people. These were not a breakaway group like we talked about Shabtai Tzvi or the Frankist or some group. They were very loyal to Judaism, but they lived their lives according to Kabbalah. And this is where he kind of grew up with these people, with a tremendous appreciation of the world of Kabbalah and the world of mysticism. Now, he grows up. He's an orphan. He's poor. He eventually marries a sister of a very well-known rabbi, Rabbi Gerson's sister. Rabbi Gershon is not very happy with this marriage because he views the Baal Shem Tov as a very simpleton, because he didn't know anything and he never studied anything.
What do you mean? But he didn't know anything, like because at that time, to be considered a smart person, you
had to be like a sitter by some rabbi. You
like
had
a
to
Talmud scholar would be the
Talmud scholar,
right.
something, publish something, write something, do something. I mean, and he was nothing.
Right.
So Gershon Kittever, looked at him like askance. I mean, why is he,
right.
But this wife saw in him this jewel. I mean, she saw that there was something special about this individual, so she went for him and she married him, and he got his first job. He was like an assistant at a school that he used to
Right.
bring the kids to school. He was like the behelper, it was called. He was the helper. He would go for the homes and he would bring the kids to school and he would deliver them home, and that was his job, and he made a few kopecks, doing that. The Maggid later on, after he became famous, and the Maggid took over from him, his successor once said about that period of his life that he wishes that he would kiss the Torah with the same love that the Baal Shem Tov
Right.
had for the children that he brought to school. That's the kind of person that he was. So there was always this gem waiting to be exposed, but he wasn't exposed yet. Now, and Jay had mentioned there's a lot of mysticism about this man, and there's not much known about him except what's written by Hasidim. So, to the victors goes the spoils.
Mhm.
So they're going to write whatever they like about this individual, And the rumor is that at 26 years old, and already he was not anymore a helper, but he was like kind of a lime digger. Near the Carpathian Mountains, you could dig lime and bring it into town and sell it. And he was a poor person, but that he had a revelation from Achia Shalini.
Mm.
Now, who's Achia Shalini? He was a prophet that lived in the time of Solomon. I mean, we're going way, way, way back. Okay, and he had this revelation of Achia Shalini, who was a prophet, and Achia Shalini said to him, "My friend, this is not your destiny. You're not a lime digger, and you're not a businessman. Your destiny is to bring into the world a new spirit of Judaism, not a new sect, and not to revolutionize anything, but to bring back the people to where they are before, to give them a sense of belonging." And he taught the Baal Shem Tov secretly for about 10 years.
Wow.
So when he was from 26 to 36, he learned with Achia Shalini Torah and Talmud and Medrash and mysticism and everything. And at 36, Achia Shalini said, "Okay, now it's time to go out there and reveal yourself." And like any other preacher in those days, he was not the first preacher. He started to travel, and by after 10 years of study, he already developed a philosophy, in life. And his method of spreading word was he used to go into a town and ask the rabbi if he can preach. And the rabbi, he said he was a preacher, and he began to talk to people, and he would get up and give his drasha. He would give his speech, and slowly but surely, he began to gather around himself a certain amount of followers. And
Right.
his talks were, again, based on Kabbalah, which, again, was very fearful to the authorities. But it also had a tinge of what we would call today in American politics populism.
Mm.
He was a populist. And that is what really scared the authorities, because at that particular time, there was a tremendous, tremendous division among the scholars and the authorities and the simple people. I mean, as a matter of fact, in many towns, the simple people were not allowed in the shul of the scholars.
Mm.
They had their own synagogues. So the butchers had their synagogue, the wagon drivers had their synagogues, and
Is that
the
was
tanners.
that because they were like elitists, or
Yeah,
that's
very
what they were?
elitist.
Right.
Very elitist. The
Right.
authorities were extremely
You
elitist.
mean, by
And the
authorities, you mean the Jewish authorities, not the
Jewish,
non-Jewish?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We're dealing only in the Jewish
Right.
world.
Okay. So you're
They
saying
had
the
very little,
authorities, the Torah
yeah,
scholars, the
Torah
rabbis,
scholars, the
okay.
rabbis,
Okay.
the
The
heads of the
community
yeshivas,
leaders. Yeah.
and this was based upon mainly the Vilna. Vilna was the home
Right.
ground of these people, what we would later known as the Misnagdim, the
Mhm.
opposition. Lithuania in general, the Lita was known as a place that they would call the Jerusalem of the East. So the scholarship was incredible.
Right.
I mean, the scholars were incredibly erudite, brilliant writers, but they had this thing with the common people. They just to them, Torah scholarship and specifically the knowledge of Talmud was primary.
Hmm.
And here
Right.
comes this young man at 36 and starts to preach a completely different type of service to God, that everybody is important and everybody has a place. and everybody needs to understand that they have a destiny and that their destiny is as important as anybody else's destiny. This is already revolutionary talk. Because when you have a system that's built on a hierarchy, and then all of a sudden someone else comes in and starts to shake the tree, you get nervous.
Right.
You get nervous. Positions are in doubt. And everything then becomes open season. So for many, he was not the first one to try it. Many have tried and failed. He tried and succeeded.
Hmm.
And because of his strength of his personality and because of his message, he attracted people to him. But the people that were attracted to him, some were scholars, but many were very simple folk.
Right.
Just simple people trying to make a living, merchants, cattle drivers, butchers.
I have a question
whatever.
about that. Sorry, I don't care if Jay has questions. I have more important questions. I'm just kidding. I was always under the impression that Jews had a very high literacy rate, but then when I learn about like the beginning of the Hasidic movement, I feel like we're telling a different story where there were all of these Jews who didn't read or didn't know how to learn Torah. So what is the story? Were there very select people that knew?
It depends where you grew up.
Okay.
It depends geographically.
Okay.
These people knew how to pray.
Did they know how to read? Like they could read a siddur?
They could read Hebrew. Many of them could read Hebrew.
Okay.
Didn't understand much of what they were reading.
Right.
It was called the Pirush HaMilos, the meaning of the words. They didn't understand, but they knew the importance of prayer. They knew the importance of saying Tehillim, so they can say Tehillim.
Right.
Many of them. There were some that were completely illiterate, but many of them were simple people. But when I say simple, I don't mean ignoramuses.
Right.
I don't mean that they were completely devoid of any type of class or grace.
Okay.
I mean, they were fine people. These were fine people, but they were simple.
Mm-hmm.
They were very simple. And when I say simple, they were like earnest.
Right.
They were serious
pious.
about the Yiddishkeit.
Yeah.
They were pious. They were what we would call today wholehearted.
Right.
They were not confused. I mean, they believed in God.
Right.
They trusted in God.
They weren't cynical.
But they were not scholars. And because they were not scholars, they were looked down by the scholars.
Right.
And when he came along and he made a statement like, okay, the words of a Tehillim sayer. Now this is going to sound wild, that the words of a Tehillim sayer, meaning when he called someone a Tehillim sayer, meant one of the simple people, reach higher than a scholar's learning.
Mm-hmm.
This they couldn't take. I mean, how dare you say that? That's like saying, everything that we do, we learn and we publish and we preach and this and that and we study hard. And you're telling me that someone who's unlearned, unlettered, unfettered is him just because he says Tehillim, they reach a higher level? He said, yeah, because theirs is authentic. They mean it. You study Torah, but you have an underlying goal. You like a little bit of honor. You like when someone comes in, they say, oh, look at you, Reb Abba. How are you, Reb Abba? Nice to see you, Reb Abba. Here comes Reb Abba. Everybody's talking about Reb Abba, right? That taints you. That taints you. They don't have that. They don't have that. They're not conceited.
Right.
They're not conceited. They're humble. They understand their place. And therefore, when God looks down and he sees who's authentic, who has a broken heart, we sit on Yom Kippur and we pray, right? Who's the ones whose tears are flowing down their cheeks? These people. They understand what it means to rely on God. They understand what a sick calf means. And, you have to have a blessing so your calf gets better. They don't have this half-hearted, look at me, look at me, look at me. I can outdo you. And that kind of philosophy really irked them. I mean, irked them to the point that they went on full-fledged war against him. I mean, full-fledged war meaning that they actually banned the whole concept of Hasidim, and they excommunicated anybody that was found to be a Hasid.
Right.
Now, just to give you a perspective of numbers, this is the best that we can understand. So he began to preach at the age of 36, which would have been 1734, I believe. If it was 1698, 1734. In 2 years, he gathered around himself about 2,000 Hasidim.
Wow.
It was about 2,000 people that would have considered themselves followers of his in different parts of towns, because one of the things that he did extensively is travel. He was always on the go, always on the go. And I'll get to that. I'll come back to that in just a moment. The legend is that by the time he passed in 1760, which was from 34, let's say, to 60 is like what, 40s, 50s, 26 years or something like that.
Right.
In 25 years, let's just say 25 years rounded up, at the end of his life, there were over 200,000 Hasidim
Wow.
in Eastern Europe. Over
Wow.
200,000. And he did it. Well, if you ask a chassid, why was he so successful? Well, justice prevails. They would say to you, what is true is going to prevail, and he brought a message of truth,
Yeah.
and people appreciated that. Others would say, well, he was a populist, and he made everybody feel special, so that's why they gravitated to him. But regardless of what the reasoning is, this is what happened.
Right.
He literally took over Eastern Europe. I mean, places like the Ukraine, places like Poland, places like Galicia, places like Hungary, all fell to Hasidim, all went the way of the Hasidim. He had a difficult time in Lithuania. That was a harder penetration because the opposition was very strong there. He did reach Germany. He was as far as Germany, but Hasidim had a very difficult time penetrating into Germany because their philosophy is so anti-German.
Mm-hmm.
Their philosophy is, it's all about, mysticism and the super rationality and prayer. And the Germans are exactly the opposite. The Germans are all about rationality.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Orthodox Jews were there. They were more like, Shamshon and Fall Hirsch. And the different time we'll talk about him. But
at this point in time, was Lithuania like the center of the thought leadership of Judaism?
Absolutely it was, and it was led by a fellow by the name of Reb Elijah of Vilna. He was known as the Gaon of Vilna. Brilliant. Once in a 10 generation kind of scholar. Totally devoted to Torah scholarship, was an expert in the Talmud and the Maimonides and all the written Torah, the revealed Torah, the oral Torah, any part of the Torah, it was at his fingertips. Later on, even Hasidim will say that he was also very, very, very knowledgeable in Kabbalah.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the leader of the opposition.
That was a bit later, right? After, didn't he
came a little bit later after the Baal Shem Tov.
A
little bit later that he was, but he was. This was the center. Yeah. This was the center of opposition. And when I say opposition, I'm not talking about like political parties where they don't like each other. I'm talking about literally if a Misnagid, which is a member of the opposition, would marry a Chassid, the parents would sit shiva.
Right.
That's how far it went. That's because they believed he is totally dangerous to Judaism. It wasn't only they were worried about their positions, in Judaism, that here was going to come a man that's going to overthrow them and it's going to, realign everything. They were seriously worried that this is Shabtai Tzvi Part 2.
Right.
Here he comes. He's again talking Kabbalah. He's talking about the concept of Mashiach. He's giving Jews hope and a redemption. He's talking words that, we don't talk about. This is not Jewish law. It's not Jewish ritual. And here it comes. It's coming. At any minute now, you're going to see that the Hasidim are going to break with Judaism, and all of a sudden they're going to proclaim him the Messiah. And that's it. And goodbye. And so they were legitimately worried
nervous
about this. They were very, very nervous, and they had a right to be. I'm not criticizing them. The only criticism I would give against the Gra was Reb Elijah. The only one is that he received rumors from people that had an agenda, and he believed the rumors about them. Like one of the rumors were that he heard that one of the great Hasidic masters drank wine on Tisha B'Av while having a girl sit on his lap. You see? That's Shabtai Tzvi round 2, because that's what Shabtai Tzvi did. He abrogated all of the laws, and he would say, no, it can't be. But people swore that they can testify that one of the great Hasidic masters drank wine on Tisha B'Av, which is prohibited, and while having a girl on his lap. Well, the story turned out to be true. It was Shabbos, Tisha B'Av. So if it's Shabbos is on Tisha B'Av, the laws of fasting are
Suspended.
set aside.
Right.
They're pushed to Sunday, and it was a 2-year-old granddaughter sitting on his lap.
Right.
Okay, so here you go. So, but he believed this. So
it's amazing this all happened without social media.
Told him it's incredible.
Before.
It's incredible.
It wasn't even TikTok's fault.
Was he put a ban on them. He literally put a ban on Hasidim, and this war against the Hasidim lasted a number of generations, and then waned and got hotter and waned and got hotter. But during his lifetime, they were really, really after him, and he had to use a lot of different guiles to get in to be able to speak at synagogues, because once they heard that he's here, it's the Baal Shem Tov, we're not going to let him in, block him. But he was able to penetrate into towns, and if the synagogues didn't let him, he would gather people at his what we called kretschma. He would gather them at his hotel room and speak to them. He would preach in the marketplace. He would preach anywhere.
Kretschma.
Just get up there and start preaching. And again, it's unfair, because like Chayaleh said, that he had such a profound impact on our personal lives. It's hard to be objective when we're not talking about Thomas Jefferson here. Yeah, we're not talking about Napoleon here.
It's funny you're mentioning Thomas Jefferson, because I was thinking, and I'm curious if either of you have a thought on this, but the Baal Shem Tov lived in the 1700s, which is the same century that the founding of this country took place. So he lived at the same time, maybe not exactly the same, he was older, but they probably crossed years with George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and certainly Benjamin Franklin, who was a bit older than the other founding fathers. And I just have such a hard time placing the Baal Shem Tov and Benjamin Franklin being in this world at the same time. I don't know why, but it just seems so odd to me that they were both alive at the same time.
I'll tell you why. Because Benjamin Franklin to you represents the United States of America, with all of its technological advances. You're thinking of Benjamin Franklin on a cell phone, and Thomas Jefferson writing the Declaration of Independence on his computer. Delete. Oh, AI, the GP chat, whatever
GPT.
GPT. Okay, GPT, give me some words. I don't like the king. Give me some words about the king, and so that's how you view Benjamin Franklin. The Baal Shem Tov is a shtetl guy,
right?
So you view him as the time of Abraham and Isaac, traveling by camel.
It's true.
It's true. So he comes into a town, and there's this.
It's a tent.
There's a tent. He comes into the marketplace. Benjamin Franklin's very sophisticated.
Right.
Different are sophisticated, and they write letters in French. And all of that stuff. So that's.
Do you feel that way too, or is it just okay?
Of course. Okay. I mean, you think of the Tzemach Tzedek and Abraham Lincoln, like, say, for example.
No, that doesn't make sense. No.
But it doesn't make sense, right? Because Abraham Lincoln was 2 years ago,
right?
And the Tzemach Tzedek was 600 years ago, even though they lived at the same time.
Right.
Because it's the milieu that we're dealing with, and the Hasidim and the Misnagdim, they kind of lived so isolated in this world.
Yeah.
Because Jay had asked, you had asked, I mentioned about secular leadership. They had very little to do with the secular leadership.
Right.
They governed themselves, and they lived in this own little world. Yes, there was anti-Semitism around, because that's part of it.
Right.
But the Hasidim were pretty much self-contained. And, they had their own shuls, and they had their own meeting places, and they had their own customs. And he introduced a new mode of prayer where Hasidim are, by geographical location, Ashkenazim. We are Ashkenazic by birth. But he instituted that our prayers should be like the Sephardim.
Right.
Because a lot of his leanings were towards the Arizal, one of the great Kabbalist masters of the 16th century in Sfat. And he took a lot of his writings and integrated it into his service. So, for example, we pray the Nusach, the liturgy of the Sephardim, because that was what the Arizal did. So it's funny, we're Ashkenazim, but we pray Sephardic.
Right.
a lot of other things that he had instituted, according to Kabbalah. And this, again, every time he made a change in any slightest, they said, "Aha, here it is. Just wait for the shoe to drop, because he's going slowly, but eventually he's going to expose himself, and we're going to see the true nature of the Hasidim." They were very joyous. In a shul, you can find people that were davening with such enthusiasm that they would roll on the ground. They would dance in the street. Joy was a major part, and scholarship is not joyous.
Right.
No, scholar. On the contrary, the less joyous you are, the better scholar you are. You ever look at these Nobel Prize winners? They look like they look very serious. They're not happy people.
Right.
They're not comedians. They're serious. And scholarship lent itself to being serious. I mean, stop it. Come on, go. And these guys, they all day long they would sing and they would dance, and they had tremendous love for living. And this irked even more so, because when you have an issue and then someone else out there is happy and you're not happy, you're twice as angry why you're not happy, and that guy's happy and he shouldn't be happy. You should be happy, but why are you not happy? Because he's happy.
Right.
So all right, so I have a couple of questions. Number one is, you had said that if someone had a kid that would end up becoming a Hasidim, they would sit Shiva.
Correct.
So just from a practical standpoint, if someone decided they were going to become a follower of the Baal Shem Tov and become Hasidim, what would they do different? Like, how would that affect their day-to-day lives, and how would people then be able to recognize them as
a Hasid? Yeah.
Okay, that's a good question. So number one, the biggest thing is they would stop davening in your shul. So here you are, you're a father, and you belong to the Anshe, lit shul, or
a real Lithuanian shul.
All of a sudden, your son is not there anymore with you. Your son is now davening with the Baal Shem Tov, or he's traveling to the Baal Shem Tov, or he's following the Baal Shem Tov. And then he comes home, and instead of studying Talmud, he spends part of the day saying Tehillim, and he spends part of the day in longer prayer. And and then of course the holidays come along. He doesn't want to be with you. He wants to be with the Baal Shem Tov, so he leaves you and he goes to the Baal Shem Tov. And the mode of prayer is a little different. And then he had instituted, for example, new customs like saying Hallel on the first 2 nights of Passover, which the Misnagdim didn't say, or having Hakafot on the first night of Shmini Atzeres, which the Misnagdim didn't have. So those are all things that are different. But it would practically impact the family, that if you were a follower, you tended to gravitate to him.
But I think it's worth saying that today, I mean, we still have these divisions within Orthodoxy. There's still the Hasidim and the non-Hasidim. And one of the easiest ways to tell them is because we actually have different dressing customs. And the men, I mean, it's different amongst the women too, but certainly among the men, you can see very quickly who is a Hasid and who's not. And I could just give you like a few examples. Hasidim wear long coats on Shabbat, and Misnagdim don't.
Some of them do.
Do they?
Some Misnagdim do.
Who?
Yeah. The Rosh Yeshiva is the head of the yeshivas.
Oh, okay, fine. But
people of importance, rabbis.
Right. That's true. They wear kapata, but mostly they don't, right?
Yeah.
Mostly they don't. Right. They wear different hats. They wear different. I mean, there's just different ways of.
Hasidim wear the fur hats,
right?
Yeah. The kashtraimel, spodix. Yeah. And the Misnagdim don't.
Right. And even though in Chabad they wear fedoras, they also wear fedoras, but they're a little different with the way I mean, there's all these little things that you can tell.
What is Misnagdim?
That's non-Hasidim, yeah.
It comes from the word misnaged, neged,
yeah.
That's what they called themselves.
Right, opposition.
We did not call them. We did not call them misnagdim. They called themselves misnagdim. We are opponents of the Hasidic movement.
But there are other words for them. I mean, you would call their communities yeshivish or Litvish meaning from Lithuania.
Even though they don't come from Lithuania,
right? But those communities,
that's what you would call
or
them.
yeshivish, which is like the yeshiva community, where the yeshiva is the center of their community.
It's not as pronounced today as it was. Although, I mean, over the years it flares up every once in a while. It flares up.
We have different customs and different
There are
yeshivas
different
and different
customs.
camps
Yes.
and different,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. But
It's,
today, no one's sitting shiva. No one's sitting shiva.
No.
right.
If your
No, you
family's
can
intermarried,
marry, right.
no one's sitting shiva. And even then, when people said they sat shiva, this was an extreme case.
Right.
I'm sure that not everybody sat shiva.
Right.
And, if they married, but it was a different mode. It was a different mode of worship. It was a different community that you belonged to. And it was uncomfortable if you had a family of, let's say, 5 children and 2 are Hasidim and 3 not. It was different. You're in Yontif. One would do this, the other would do that. So
it was funny you mentioned when you were talking about when you were talking about him bringing the joy back into the religion and really kind of you'd mentioned how sort of more of the lay person, that their prayers are worth more. I know this person was not a big fan of Jews, but it kind of reminded me a little bit of Martin Luther, and bringing the religion to the people, and really taking it out of the hands of
it, right.
and he was basically a populist essentially for
similar
Catholicism.
I mean, the Baal Shem Tov didn't invent populism. I mean, it was around before, and it's been around forever. I mean, we could go back to Abraham's days. He was probably one of the first populists, that existed. But the Baal Shem Tov had a message at a time when Jews really were reeling. I mean, both through the Shabtai Tzvi debacle, that really, I mean, we can't even really appreciate what kind of devastation that brought upon the Jewish community. I mean, he had thousands and thousands of followers. People put their entire belief, into him, and they truly believed that, it's over. Messiah is definitely coming, and it turned out to be a bust. So they were very depressed. And then you had the Khmelnytsky massacres, where the Ukrainian Cossacks overthrew the Polish lords, in Ukraine and drove them out. And with that, they massacred over 200,000 Jews, because Jews represented allies of the Poles, and et cetera, et cetera.
Our best friends.
So Ukrainians, our best friends. And Ukrainians, massacred, Khmelnytsky massacred over 200,000, Jews. So between these two episodes, the Jewish community was reeling. So the Misnagdim, the opponents, they rallied around Torah scholarship. Listen, this is what God wants. We're not interested in philosophy. Just sit and study. That's it. That's your job. Sit, study. That's what's going to get you closer to God, and don't ask any questions. But to the rest of the world, they were wondering why. I mean, if we're the chosen people, what's going on? So there was what we would call it. There was a great malaise among the Jewish people. They just were not feeling good. They were down. They were downtrodden. Anti-Semitism was on the rise. They had nowhere to go. They were poor. And then all of a sudden, this man comes and gives them hope and says, "Wait, why are you down? Well, what's wrong with you? You, Shmerel, you have an important position in Judaism. You have a destiny that only you, even the great Gra, the great Rebbe Elijah of Vilna, how great he is, can't fulfill your destiny. You have to do it." And they said, "Really? I mean, we're a somebody? I mean, I could pick my head up. I can actually." He said, "Of course you can pick your head up. And not only can you pick your head up, but your head is actually higher than that guy next to you, who's a bit of a faker. He plays a good game, but we know in his heart he's not so authentic. He's not so pure. So you keep doing what you're doing." They tell. Look, there's a lot of legends about him. I mean, we could spend here hours talking about stories, because the legends of the Baal Shem Tov, when I was a kid, they told me once in camp, my counselor, that there are more stories about the Baal Shem Tov on Saturday nights than the Saturday nights that he lived. If you count all the Saturday nights and all the stories on Saturday nights,
but we grew up. I mean, we grew up that you told a Baal Shem Tov story all the time. Like our teachers, my father, like every event or every gathering or every Saturday night, we would hear a story of the Baal Shem Tov, and they were outrageous stories. Some of them, I mean, some of them were very realistic and believable.
Short little story.
Yeah, tell one legend of the Baal Shem Tov so people understand.
This would encapsulate a lot of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So one day the Baal Shem Tov, this was his custom. He would call a few of his closest students and said, "We're going on a journey." They didn't ask what, when, where, and how. They got into the wagon. This could either be Saturday night, Sunday night, wherever. Legend has it that there was no wagon drivers, that the horses themselves knew where the Baal Shem Tov wanted to go. So this was horsemanless, not horseless, but horsemanless. All right, okay, right away there is, okay, oh, wow.
Fantastic.
Okay, there was no wagon driver. The horses knew where to go. Fine. Okay, so they go. They come to this little hamlet. Baal Shem Tov stops, gets out of the car, says, this is where we're spending the night. They spend the night in this little hamlet. In the morning, it was a Jewish home. In the morning, they get up and they start to pray. The owner of the home gets up, he puts on his talis and he puts on his tefillin, and he takes the siddur and he begins to read the siddur from page 1, and he does the entire siddur. Meaning, he does the morning prayer, the afternoon prayer, the evening prayer. He does grace after meals.
The Hanukkah prayer.
Prayers. He does the Yom Kippur prayers. He does the Tachnun. He does Hallel. He does Slich. He does the whole siddur. Baal Shem Tov was looking at the guy, and he can't believe what he's seeing. The guy's praying through the whole siddur. So they're waiting for breakfast, but the guy's doing the whole siddur. So the Baal Shem Tov says to him, Reb Shmerel, what's the story? He says, look, I'm a simple guy. I grew up. My father barely taught me anything, but he did teach me how to read Hebrew. But he died before he explained to me what is supposed to be said. So I have no idea what the morning prayers are. I could read the words. So I figure I'm going to cover all my bases. And if I do the whole siddur, I know that I've at least done the morning prayers. So the Baal Shem Tov said, Shmerel, you're amazing, but let me save you some time, okay? I'm going to write down on a piece of paper what you have to do every day. Page 1 to 27, the morning prayers. 27 to 30, grace after meals. 31 to 37, afternoon. And he wrote a whole paper with all the instructions. Shmerel was very thankful. He put the paper on the fireplace, and the Baal Shem Tov told the students, let's go. As they open up the door to get into the wagon, a wind comes by, and guess what? Takes the paper and blows it right into the fireplace, and it's burnt. Shmerel is standing there, and he goes, no, oh, come on, how could this happen? Finally, someone comes by and gives me instructions that could literally save me hours of prayers, and it just goes into the fireplace. No, I can't. It can't happen. So now he decides he's going to go after the Baal Shem Tov, because he's going to redo the paper. He walks out, but they're already gone. But he sees them in a distance, so he starts to run. They're in a wagon, so they're running. And they're galloping. He's running after them, and he keeps running and running, and they keep moving further and further. And they come to a lake. How are you going to cross the lake? So the Baal Shem Tov reaches into his pocket. He takes out a handkerchief. He puts it on the water, and him and the entire, all the horses and the wagon glide on the water across the lake. Okay, they come to the other side of the lake. The Baal Shem Tov picks up his handkerchief, squeezes it out, puts it down. They get back into their wagon. Shmerel sees it from a distance. He comes to the lake. Now, what's he supposed to do? He's not going to swim across the lake. He figures, okay, he saw what the Baal Shem Tov did. He took the handkerchief, he put it down on the water, and he glided on top of the water. It literally glided on top of the water on his handkerchief. Eventually, the Baal Shem Tov stopped to pray the afternoon, and Shmerel caught them. Now he's really tired because running a few hours after the wagon, and Baal Shem Tov sees him and then says, "Shmerel, so nice to see you again. What brings you here?" So they says, "I'm so sorry to bother you, Baal Shem Tov. I know your time is extremely limited, and but I lost the paper. Is there any chance that you could redo the paper for me?" The Baal Shem Tov says, "Shmerel, with pleasure. But I have one question. How did you get across the lake?" So Shmerel is such an innocent guy. I mean, this just exemplifies what a chassid is, and why the Baal Shem Tov loved these people. So he says in all simplicity, he says to the Baal Shem Tov, "Well, I saw you, and you put a handkerchief down and glided along the water, and I did the same, and I glided along the water." The Baal Shem Tov says, "Shmerel, you don't need a paper. Whatever you've been doing, go back and do that. Obviously, God loves what you're doing, because if you can glide along the water, you don't need any help whatsoever." And he went back, and that was the story. Now, did this story ever happen?
Yes.
Possibly. Yes. Yes. Now, what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is the simplicity and the earnestness of a simple Jew.
Yeah.
And this is just exemplifies that here was a simple guy who didn't know much, but prayed earnestly every day. And even though that he prayed for hours needlessly because he was saying everything else, but God listened to him to the point that when he needed something from God, he needed a little miracle to get across the lake. God was happy to oblige, because you do everything for me. Every day you reach up to me and you say to me, I love you, I care for you, I want to be close to you. And look, I'm sitting the whole day praying. So here, you need a little miracle, you need to get across the water, no problem here. And the Baal Shem Tov realized that had he written the paper, he would have punctured the balloon.
Right.
The mystery would have dissolved,
But
and he would have been a regular guy, fine. But
can I say something about these stories, though?
Yes.
Because I've heard that story many times. Love it. It's a very nostalgic story, and I love the Baal Shem. I mean, there's nothing like a good Baal Shem Tov story with lessons, and the way you tell them, especially, are always really good. But I've always struggled because I feel like a loser because I'm definitely not the Baal Shem Tov in the story, but I'm also not these simple, amazing people who had so much, pure faith. And so, what's a person? Work. Where am I? Like, who am I?
Work. It takes work.
But to even be the simple person?
Yes, of course. It takes tremendous amount of work. It takes a tremendous amount of work to be wholehearted.
Right.
To say to yourself that I have simple faith, that I want to give myself up, that, my needs are secondary, but my relationship with God is primary. It's just a lot of work.
Are there people like that today?
Of course. Absolutely. Many, many Hasidim are like that today.
Shoot. I thought maybe you would say no. Now I have to try. I thought maybe because of technology.
No one's going to force you. But that was the message of the Baal Shem Tov to his students. His students then became leaders themselves, and they preached this. And Chabad, especially, the Rebbes of Chabad always said there are two types of people. There's the maskil, the intellectual, the scholar, and there's the oived, the person that works hard on themselves to rid themselves of bad characteristic traits. You're a jealous person. Work on yourself. Pray every day that God eradicates this terrible character issue of being jealous or anger or, of lying and all of these things. And the Rebbes, the leaders of Chabad, always said, maskil is very good, but it's not as good as an oived, a person that works on themselves and tries to refine themselves. Mm-hmm. That's the purpose. The intellectual study should lead you to working on yourself. But here's a person like Shmerel who, had simple faith, who believed in the Baal Shem Tov and believed in God, did all of these things without, questioning and being cynical and, and all the things that we have here in America.
Yeah.
That's what the Baal Shem Tov strove for, to be earnest, wholehearted, with joy. And if we can do that, that's the message of Hasidism. And that's why it became so popular. Is because everyone can do this.
Yeah.
Everyone can do this. Is it easy? No, but what is easy?
Right.
Well, what is easy? Nothing. Nothing in the world that's worth doing is easy. You have to work on it. And the same thing is true with our traits, with our characteristics. Many of us are lazy. You're a jealous guy, so you self-pity yourself and you say, well, that's how God made me. So what do you want from me? What do you want from me? And what do I want from you? I want from you the idea to be a little better.
Yeah.
Don't be a jealous guy. Don't get eaten up by seeing what other people do or have. Work on yourself. Be happy for someone else.
Well, that
was the Baal Shem Tov.
Well, that's Jordan Peterson. I heard him say this one time, and he said, "You should never ever compare yourself to anybody else. You should only ever compare yourself to who you were yesterday."
Mm.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And Reb Zusha of Anapol, who became one of the founding fathers of the Hasidic movement, a couple of generations after the Baal Shem Tov, said that when he dies and he goes to heaven, they're not going to ask him, why weren't you like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob or Moses? they're going to ask you, why weren't you like Zusha? Meaning that I was given certain characteristics, certain traits, certain advantages, certain skills. Why didn't I use those skills? Why every day did I let it go by when I had so much opportunity to do good, both for myself, both for my family? And here's a man that strove his entire life. He was so poor, Reb Zusha, but the message always was from the Hasidim: work on yourself, become a better person, be a finer person, be a happier person.
Did the Baal Shem Tov have kids?
Yes.
Oh, he did?
He
Okay.
did have kids. He had a son, Reb Tzvi. He had a number of daughters. Reb Nachman of Breslov is actually his great grandson.
Right. Oh, right. I forgot that.
From his daughters.
Right.
But his son, who took over in 1760, because that's how the Hasidic movement was built, like a dynasty.
Right.
1 year after taking over, at a gathering, said that my father appeared to me last night, and he said that I should please give up the seat of honor to Reb Dov Ber of Mezrich, that you deserve to be the leader of the Hasidic movement. And he knew, Reb Tzvi knew it wasn't a matter of that he was fighting it. He knew that the Maggid was the Baal Shem Tov's number one student and was with him, was attending him for years, attended him, and had a very special relationship, the two of them. And ceremoniously he took off, there was a white hat that the Baal Shem Tov wore, and he took off the white hat and he placed it on the Maggid's head, and that's symbolized that he had given over.
He passed it over.
He passed over the leadership to the Maggid to do that. And the Maggid then afterwards, after the Maggid, then it splintered into different groups. And there was never any one official leader of the Hasidic movement. But he had a tremendous impact, not only on the Hasidic movement, but on the Misnagdim as well.
Right.
As much as the Misnagdim are going to deny that he had any influence on them, he did have influence. And I think it works both ways. I think the Misnagdim had influence on the Hasidim as well.
Right.
I think many of the Hasidim could have flown off the coop. There was such unbound joy and inspiration and just enthusiasm that they could have gone off the rails.
Right.
Some of them could have gone off the rails, and the Misnagdim maybe pulled them back a little bit, just tempered them.
Yeah,
and the Hasidim said to the Misnagdim, hey, you know what? It's okay to smile. It's all right. I mean, you're not gonna die if you smile. Bring some joy into Judaism. So I think both groups, as much as they were countering each other, I think each one had a little effect on on each other, and then ultimately they realized, you know what, there's a bigger enemy out there. It's called anti-Semitism,
right.
And the more we fight internally, the more splintered we're going to be. So for the rest of the time, a couple of generations later, they already were working together to stop anti-Semitic, legislation, and ultimately, even before World War II, already many of the Hasidim and the Litvish great rabbis, worked together and were friendly together. There was always a few holdouts. But one of them who really, really exemplified this idea of being a misnagid but reaching across the aisle to the Hasidim was the Chafetz Chaim. He was a great rabbi that died in 1935. Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Kagan, and he and when people asked him, how come you're so friendly to Hasidim? Don't you remember the story of the Baal Shem Tov and the God? So he answered by way of an analogy. A rich man had two daughters, and he married off the first daughter, and the first son-in-law was a great scholar, but he didn't need any dairy. Oh, okay, weirdo. But okay, he was a scholar, but a weirdo. So he had a long table of goods and a separate table for his son-in-law and his daughter. The second daughter got married, and the second son-in-law says he doesn't eat any meat. He only eats dairy. Okay, another weirdo. So he had a long table, and the two son-in-laws ate at separate sides. One was only meat, and the other was only dairy. Eventually, he became poor. He went to his son-in-laws and said, look, when I was rich and I can afford meat and dairy, it paid to sit at separate tables. But since I can only afford bread and water now, how about we all sit at one table? The Chafetz Chaim said to the fellow, the Gaon, the great Rebbe Elijah Vilna, and the Baal Shem Tov, they were compared to rich people. They each had their own things. They were allowed to sit at separate tables. We we're poor.
Mm.
Okay, we all have to sit at one table. We don't have the
I never
same.
heard that story. I like that.
We don't have the same gravitas as they had.
Yeah.
They were great. They both of them were incredibly holy people, and they had their own ideologies. Fine. We today, now, nah, we're orphans. Come, we can all sit together. I think that kind of an ideology is where we are at today in Judaism. It doesn't pay to fight. We're all in this together.
True.
There's a much bigger enemy out there, especially here in America. It's called assimilation. It's killing us, literally killing the Jewish people here in the United States. So why fight among the Orthodox? Who, what, when, where, how? Let's just get together and fight that enemy, because losing a Jew to assimilation is equally to losing a Jew back in the days of when they converted to Christianity.
So there's one thing before we wrap up, I want to make sure we don't skip over, is because I think it really brings the Baal Shem Tov's life full circle, which is at the very, very end of his life, when he was brought in to debate Jacob Frank.
I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, okay.
I thought I knew a lot about the Baal Shem Tov, and I've read a lot about the Baal Shem Tov, but I'm sorry, that episode, I have to admit, kata inti, I'm small, like Jacob said that I am small, and I never heard that he debated Jacob Frank. I thought Jacob Frank was long dead before this. But
I will double check my sources, but I'm pretty sure I did not make this up. That
you probably did. You probably dreamed it.
That's true. Maybe the Baal Shem Tov came to me in my dream and implanted.
But again, I don't have the last word on this. But if there's a history of this, or there's the source for this, I'd be more than happy to see it.
I think he's right, actually.
He went through a number of debates. The Baal Shem Tov went through a tremendous number of debates, but it was not with Jacob Frank.
Hold on. I think he's right. I'm looking it up in real time because there's something called the internet now. Yes. It's really cool. And you can see, let's see, I think it's, let me look quickly. I think so.
Go ahead.
While I'm looking at this, I want you to consider if Benjamin Franklin ever met the Baal Shem Tov. I'm very stuck on this idea.
Okay. Next thing,
do you think they hung out?
The Baal Shem Tov actually signed the Declaration of Independence. If you look at one of the signatures, it's actually Yisrael Rebbe Eliezer. It's very fine, and but he wrote it in Hebrew. You can't tell. It looks like John Clay, but it's actually Israel Baal Shem Tov.
I'm reading a book about.
So did you find it?
I can't look and talk at the same time. But
and I also think when George Washington crossed the Delaware, it was over the Baal Shem Tov's.
Oh, here it is.
No. George Washington came to the Isle.
Here, this is what it says.
He crossed the Delaware to come to Queens, New York, to be at the Rebbe's graveside to pray for successful.
This is what it says. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. It says, the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, was reportedly so distraught by the Frankists going over to Catholicism that he went into a depression from which he never fully recovered. At the same time, the baptism of the Frankists was a boost for the conservative Talmudist and drove a final nail into the coffin of the era's messianic naivete. That's what it says here. Yeah, so I don't know.
That's not debating Jacob Frank.
Oh, I see.
I don't know.
That's
we're gonna have to do some research.
Yeah.
No, he was angry that there were people that were assimilating and converting. Yes. Yeah. But listen, you have different writers that wrote about the Baal Shem Tov from a different perspective. I remember as a young rabbi in Boston. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jay.
You found it.
So it says in 1759, the Besht was chosen to be one of 3 delegates representing the rabbis in a highly publicized debate with the Frankists in Lemberg.
Okay, the Frankists, not Jacob Frank.
You might be right. Maybe you might be right. Soon after the debate,
you're kind of both right.
So he debated the Frankists.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. The Frankists, not Jacob Frank himself.
I thought you got my father on something. This is so annoying.
So close. So close.
This is so annoying.
So close.
Yeah. No, it would have been a heard of if it was, and even this debate, I'd have to go back. and see if it was, what the
What happened,
circumstances
right,
were.
right.
I mean, it could have been they met in a town and they sat over a glass of beer in a tavern, and this was
Right.
this was the debate. That
But
could have been.
so I think my point still holds that he debated the Frankists, not Jacob
Right,
Frank, the
right,
Frankists in 1759, and then he passed away in 1760.
So
that's
true.
just after, so just after his debate.
I will
Guys, this is a play of how I am in graduate school. Jay, you are playing me right now, trying to act like I did my homework and I know what I'm talking about. And my father is the professor who's trying to be nice and be like, yeah, you're so close. But this is me every single day in graduate school. So I'm so glad you're having this experience so that you can understand how I feel.
Yeah.
We're gonna cut this. We're gonna cut this anyway. So.
We are not cutting this. We are not cutting this.
I'm not surprised that he would have gone into a debate because he would do anything for Yiddishkeit.
Right.
I don't know if he would have gone into the debate with the understanding that there's no winning this debate. You're going against the Frankists. You're not changing their minds, and they're not going to change his mind. So what would have been the purpose of doing this? That's my only question.
Do you think? Go on.
Because he was a man of action, and when he came to a town, he had an agenda, and I don't see where he would have, especially later in life when he was already not traveling as much. Later in life, there's so many things about him that we skipped about his wish to go to Israel that he never accomplished. He wanted very much to go to Israel to be at the holy places, but it never happened. He tried a number of times, was always foiled, to do that. And there's a lot of things in his life, but the bottom line is that he did bring in a new spirit, into Judaism. He revived a number of thousands and thousands of people and gave them hope, in this, and it caught on, and it's thriving today. I mean, it was thriving in Eastern Europe, and my grandparents and both sides were Hasidim, and
Do you think he ever met the Marquis de Lafayette? Because he also lived at that time.
I'm sure he did, and he debated him.
I'm just curious because I'm reading a book about him right now.
Haile is going to name every person she's ever heard of that lived around this time.
Yes, he did. And him and Thomas Paine actually, they edited,
Did he know Marie Antoinette by any chance?
Yes, he did. He did.
Well, she would have lived
a lot of
later.
time in France hanging out with Voltaire. Him and Voltaire would be seen at a French coffee houses very often.
Oh my God.
Okay. And they just, when you talk about weird circumstances, there is a weird something that a letter that Karl Marx wrote congratulating Abraham Lincoln on his victory of becoming president. That's
so
true.
Weird. I know.
That is true.
Weird too.
And when you think about these two men and what they both represented, that is strange.
Yeah.
That's a strange one, but that does exist. Yeah. The letter does exist. Wishing him, and then you think about it, Marx and Lincoln.
I know.
I mean, how do you put those two together? But
one day when they write about us in 500 years, it's going to be like, wait, did they live at the same time as Donald Trump? That's so weird. Do you think they ever met him?
Do you think they met Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Who's that?
Yeah, that's true.
But you know what? The thing is,
anyways,
we finish with this. We go back to Donald Trump.
No.
The man has literally single-handedly captivated the political world for how long now? Since
a decade.
2016?
2015, almost. Yeah, 2015.
I mean, it's almost 10 years. 10 years we've been obsessed
so close
with this
to
guy.
being done with him, and now
we're
not
even close.
I'm saying we were close, meaning like he could have not run again, and then we wouldn't have to talk about him for the next 4 years. It
wouldn't have ended like today. Had he lost, it was not ending like today. He was not coming out in Mar-a-Lago and saying, I want to congratulate Kamala Harris on being the president. There's no way, no chance. No, this would have dragged on for months, especially if he was leading late into the night. And then all of a sudden, the three states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan flipped at the last moment and went her way.
No.
They stole it, just like they did in 2020. They stole it from me. And then he would have come out, America's mayor would have come out with, on a hot summer's day with his hair dripping down
Do you
his
think?
scalp
Oh God!
in front of a porn shop,
Oh my
you know,
God.
and call. Remember that
Poor Giuliani. I know.
Giuliani, who was
Do you
at one
think
point. At one point in history,
he was a
Giuliani was
great?
maybe
Yeah.
one of the most popular people in the United States of America.
Do you think
It was,
Donald Trump
Oh,
knows
yeah.
about the Baal Shem Tov?
yes, he does.
Okay.
Because he went to the Rebbe's. He went to the Rebbe's grave a
It's
week
true.
ago.
By the way, that's why Kamala didn't win, because she did not go to the Chabad Rebbe's
No, and
grave.
look, anybody that came won.
Yeah, yeah.
She came. Gillibrand
Yeah, she
came,
was there.
the senator, and she won.
Yeah.
Trump went and he won.
The new governor of Delaware, who's a Jewish guy, went to
Put
Chabad
on
yesterday to
tefillin.
put on tefillin, and he
He
won.
won.
I saw
He
that.
won.
I saw
You
that.
know,
Yeah,
I mean, the Ohel now is like it's like Disneyland. I mean,
That's the Vatican.
Yeah, it's like the Vatican. Yeah,
like the Vatican. You have
Oh
to
my
come there now
God.
and do that. I mean,
It's
you know,
weird.
good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him. I mean, I was a little bit cynical when he came there and said, come on. You know, we sell ourselves. You know, if it wasn't so close to the election, okay, you want to bring someone to the it's great, it's wonderful. But it was so overplayed
Yeah.
and you know, so obvious, you know, why he's doing this. It just didn't sit well with me.
Well,
as well as other Chabad rabbis who gave
embraced it. Yeah.
who gave you know, prayer services to a Republican to his rallies. I would not approve of it.
Right. Well,
I don't
edJEWcation
think the
is
Rebbe
a
would approve it.
nonpartisan
It's
podcast.
not. We don't
We are
vote.
nonpartisan.
We vote.
We love
and
everyone.
We love everyone.
let's
I'll
not go
just-
that far. Let's not. You know,
maybe we'll do an episode on politics and the Orthodox world, because I'm very interested in that right now, and I'm thinking a lot about it. And so maybe I'll wade into it a little bit if we can one day, because I think there's a lot to say there. A lot of interesting stuff. Anyway, thank you for listening. If you made it this far, we appreciate it. Follow us and send us emails, and you know, tell your friends. And we are on YouTube, and we're on Spotify and Apple, and just
Instagram.
We're on Instagram, edJEWcation, Twitter. We have a Twitter.
We have an email now.
Yeah.
edJEWcationpod@gmail.com.
That's right.
I'll say it since Haile can never remember the email address.
That is true. I have no idea. What's email, by the way? Anyway.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so
ask Benjamin Franklin. He'll tell you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
See ya.